The streets of downtown Silver Springs buzzed with the rhythm of a city in motion, honking cars, hurried footsteps, and the occasional chatter of street vendors calling out their specials. But amidst the everyday hum of urban life, a moment of quiet injustice was unfolding. Jonathan Reed stepped out of his sleek black sedan with the effortless confidence of a man accustomed to command. His navy suit was crisp, his leather shoes polished to a mirror shine. In his right hand, he carried a well-worn leather briefcase, a testament to years of hard work and dedication. He had the look of success, of respectability. But to Officers Anderson and Miller, he had the look of suspicion. "Sir, stop right there," Anderson barked, his fingers twitching over the handle of his holstered weapon. Jonathan turned, his expression calm but questioning. "Officers, is there a problem?" Miller glanced at Anderson before delivering the rehearsed excuse. "We're investigating reports of a vehicle matching yours being involved in a theft." A flimsy accusation, a lie wrapped in the thinnest veil of authority. Jonathan met their gaze, unshaken. "That's interesting. I'd like to see the report." But Anderson wasn't interested in explanations. He was looking for control. "Hands where I can see them. You're under arrest for obstruction of justice." The words cut through the air like a whip crack. Around them, pedestrians slowed, heads turning. Someone pulled out a phone. Another followed suit. Jonathan could feel the weight of a dozen eyes on him, but he didn't flinch. Even as cold steel locked around his wrists, even as humiliation threatened to crawl up his spine, he stood tall. "You're making a grave mistake," he said, his voice steady as a rock. Anderson smirked. Miller chuckled under his breath. To them, Jonathan Reed was just another man who needed to be put in his place. They had no idea who they had just arrested. Inside the dimly lit precinct, the air was thick with the stale scent of burnt coffee and overconfidence. Officers Anderson and Miller leaned back in their chairs, feet up, basking in their latest display of authority. "Thinks he's some kind of big shot?" Anderson sneered, tossing a smug glance toward the holding cell. Miller smirked. "Guess he thinks staying quiet makes him look innocent." Jonathan Reed sat with the composed stillness of a man who had nothing to prove. He wasn't rattled, wasn't pleading, wasn't giving them the satisfaction of a reaction. He simply waited. And outside the station, a storm was brewing. The world had seen everything. Videos of the arrest spread across social media like wildfire. Outrage ignited as hashtags demanding justice trended at breakneck speed. News anchors dissected every second of the footage, while civil rights activists flooded the internet with calls for accountability. The name Jonathan Reed was on everyone's lips, everyone's, except the officers who had put him in cuffs. They remained blissfully unaware, their arrogance shielding them from the reality that was closing in. That is, until Jonathan finally broke his silence. Calm, controlled, commanding. "I need to contact my office. I have court tomorrow." The sergeant on duty, a grizzled man with decades in the force, leaned against the desk, unimpressed. "What, you plan to defend yourself?" Jonathan didn't blink, didn't waver. "No, I am the judge." The room froze. The silence was deafening. The sergeant's smirk faltered as he rushed to the computer, fingers fumbling over the keyboard. Anderson and Miller exchanged uneasy glances as a creeping dread settled in their bones. And then there it was. Jonathan Reed, Justice of the Peace. Presiding Judge, Silver Springs Municipal Court. Their blood ran cold. The man they had humiliated, handcuffed, and mocked wasn't just another name in their arrest log. He was the one who decided their fate. The courthouse was packed to the brim. Every seat was filled with journalists, activists, and outraged community members who had seen the footage of Jonathan Reed's wrongful arrest. Camera flashes flickered, reporters whispered, and the air buzzed with anticipation. Then the doors opened. Judge Jonathan Reed entered, his black judicial robe flowing behind him like the cloak of justice itself. Gone were the handcuffs, the humiliation, the unjust treatment. In their place stood a man in his rightful position, commanding, unwavering, in complete control. A hush fell over the room. At the defendant's table sat Officers Anderson and Miller. Their usual smugness had evaporated, replaced by stiff postures and darting eyes. Their palms were slick with sweat. The weight of their mistake had fully settled in. Judge Reed took his seat at the bench, his voice ringing through the courtroom, firm and resolute. Officers Anderson and Miller, you stand accused of racial profiling, unlawful arrest, and abuse of power. Do you have anything to say in your defense? A heavy pause. Then, a stammer. We were just following protocol, Anderson muttered, his voice lacking the confidence he once wielded. Acting on a report, Miller added weakly, his words trailing off as if even he didn't believe them. Their excuses crumbled the moment the evidence played. Screens flickered on, displaying the viral videos that had captivated the nation. The courtroom watched in pin-drop silence as Anderson barked orders at Jonathan. They saw Miller smirk as the handcuffs snapped shut. They heard the officer's mocking laughter, contrasting sharply with Jonathan's calm and dignified responses. The truth was undeniable. One by one, witnesses took the stand. Bystanders described the officer's aggression, the fabricated charges, the unnecessary force. The prosecution presented Jonathan's spotless record, decades of honorable service, a man of justice and integrity. And then came the final, bitter irony. At the moment of his arrest, Jonathan Reed had been on his way to meet the mayor. His purpose? To discuss police reform and accountability. Anderson and Miller had unwittingly become the perfect case study for everything wrong with the system. They had tried to teach a lesson in power. Instead, they were about to learn one themselves. The verdict came swiftly, ringing through the packed courtroom like a final gavel strike on arrogance and abuse, suspended without pay, pending further investigation. Officers Anderson and Miller sat frozen, their faces drained of color. The weight of their reckless actions had finally caught up with them, not just as an internal police matter, but as a full-blown public scandal. The media swarmed the courthouse steps, microphones clutched tightly as reporters fired off breaking news updates. Social media exploded. The city was watching. The nation was watching. Accountability had arrived. Under mounting pressure, the police chief stood before the cameras, his expression grim. He cleared his throat, gripping the podium like it might steady the storm swirling around him. "We failed Jonathan Reed," he admitted, "and we failed this community." The apology was formal, polished, but empty, because no words could erase the damage. No carefully crafted statement could undo what had been done. The department had been exposed not as protectors of justice, but as enforcers of systemic racism. Their badge no longer gleamed with honor. It was now a symbol of everything that needed to change. Jonathan Reed could have let the injustice consume him. He could have let anger take root, let bitterness harden his heart. But instead, he did what true leaders do. He turned his pain into progress. With widespread public support, he took the fight beyond his courtroom. He spearheaded a new wave of police reform, focusing on 3 pillars of accountability: mandatory racial bias training to dismantle prejudice from the inside out, community engagement programs to rebuild trust between law enforcement and the people they served, independent oversight committees to ensure that misconduct wouldn't be buried under bureaucracy. The scandal had shaken the city, but Jonathan's response galvanized it. Statewide reforms were introduced, setting stricter accountability measures for officers. Protests demanding justice rippled across the state, bringing together people of all races, backgrounds, and beliefs. Months later, Jonathan stood on the steps of City Hall, watching as a new class of police recruits marched into the academy. They were diverse, well-trained, and committed to ethical service, a far cry from the unchecked power that had once thrived in those uniforms. The fight for justice was far from over. Change was slow, resistance inevitable. But as Jonathan stood there watching a system he had fought to reshape, he allowed himself a small, hopeful smile. One day, justice wouldn't be an uphill battle. One day it would be a given.